Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
Let's talk about some of our updates. Overwhelmingly, a lot of you guys have asked about the Asha Degree update. And I want to say last season I did an update about her, but there is some new development. There's a new search warrant in the 25-year-old Asha Degree disappearance case. It points to a possible connection with the Dedmon family of Cleveland County, North Carolina. Allegedly, one of the daughters, Lizzie Foster, formerly Dedmon, confessed at a party to killing Asha Degree, while another daughter, Sarah Dedmon Capel, told her to be quiet while she was confessing to this murder. Text messages between the sisters reveal discussions about potential evidence, a shirt possibly linked to the case, and attempts to calm Lizzie's increasing anxiety. Despite these revelations and the FBI's earlier identification of the Dedmon family as a person of interest, no arrests have been made and the investigation is ongoing. Now, moving on to the Anaya Mack case, which we covered a couple of weeks ago, it was a couple of cases back. We talked about the Reverend Floyd Strickland. And shout out to Justin. Justin has been keeping me up to date via email. He told me that Reverend Strickland is now going by Reverend Dr. Floyd Strickland, and he was preaching at called Mount Olive Galilee Baptist Church. However, shortly after our friend Justin updated me about this so we could get the news out that he is now, preaching at this church and bring more awareness to what he did in the Anaya Mack case. And after, we then find out that he just was arrested on embezzlement charges, which stem from funds that he managed at Mount Olive Church. He embezzled some funds and they looked into it and then turned over the case to law enforcement. They also identified a deacon who was at the church named Armin Barnes. He was also identified in connection to the embezzlement charges. And this is in lieu of all that has happened. So we're just keeping you guys up to date. But what I did find interesting that in the Kalamazoo charges that he was faced with for the child abuse that he faced, he wasn't required to register as a sex offender. Did you know that, MD?
Interesting. I wonder how he was able to get out of that. He must not have pled guilty to charges against they must not have found him guilty. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more digging to understand how he was able to get out of that.
Yeah, it sounded like it's a plea agreement that he reached. So I don't know if that was a part of it, like you serve this time and then you won't have to, or I don't know if was it a situation with the law, but for whatever reason, he got caught back up in some charges. So
Interesting.
now you guys know. Now we're going to get into our true crime case for the day, MD.
So grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, or your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it.
Today, our story is about Karlyn Ramirez. I've entitled today's case A Soldier's Secret. Tuesday, August 25th, was a normal day at the Lakeland Townhomes in Maryland. A maintenance worker who was making his rounds around the complex noticed the back sliding doors was open to one of the homes. Now, this was unusual, and much like me and most people, when you see something unusual, you shouldn't go investigate for yourself. He decided that this was such an oddity that he needed to call the police. When the Ardenelle Police Department arrived, they knocked on the door and they waited for someone to let them in, but nobody said anything. So they made their way through the townhome. Eventually, going upstairs, they saw a female body lying on the floor of the bedroom. And she wasn't the only one there. She was holding her 4-month-old infant in her hands. Now, the baby was unharmed, thankfully. However, the woman was deceased. Immediately, the officer took the unharmed infant to be checked by paramedics. They observed multiple gunshot wounds to her chest. The comforter of her bed was distressed, and it suggested that some kind of struggle had ensued. They also noticed that the victim's underwear and shorts were pulled down to her knees, suggesting an obvious sexual assault. They found shell casings on the floor. They were able to identify the weapon as a .357 caliber revolver. Upon further investigation, they discovered a condom wrapper in the living room and they found the other part of the wrapper in the trash can. And this further caused the investigators to believe that this was a murder of a sexual assault obviously gone wrong. Now, as they were doing their due diligence, getting the crime scene in, they went outside to discover Sergeant McDaniels outside. He was a superior officer and he showed up because one of his service members didn't show up for work. And he wanted to make sure that everything was okay. So he told investigators that the townhome that they were inside of belonged to two people that were a part of his team. One person's name was Karlyn Ramirez, and her roommate's name was Marissa. And because of the description that he gave, police believed that the victim was Karlyn Ramirez. Karlyn Ramirez was born on April 10th, 1991, in Del Rio, Texas. It's a city located approximately 150 miles west of San Antonio. Following her graduation from high school, Karlyn pursued higher education like most of us do, and she earned an associate's degree. Subsequently, she made the decision that it wasn't for the best that she stayed in school. She decided to enlist in the military. This choice was influenced by her family history, as both her mother and her aunt had previously served. Therefore, her family offered considerable support and understanding for her chosen path. Karlyn quickly distinguished herself in the military, demonstrating a competitive spirit and drive to excel that positioned her for rapid advancement.
13, Carlin's deployment to South Korea became a life altering experience, primarily due to her encounter with Malik Kearney, a 35-year-old chemical weapons specialist. Their connection was instantaneous. Kearney, being older and holding a respected position in the Army, was undoubtedly an appealing figure. Carlin's attraction was understandable, and this initial spark appeared to be mutual, but setting in motion a series of events that would tragically reshape their destinies. Within 6 months of their initial meeting and beginning of their relationship, Karlyn announced that she was pregnant. And she was elated by the news because they just became engaged and they were eagerly planning their wedding. Karlyn was stationed at Fort Meade in Maryland, and in anticipation of their new life together, Malik applied for a reassignment so that he could be closer to her. However, his request was denied, and he had to remain in South Carolina. On April 23rd, 2015, the two of them welcomed their daughter into the world. Karlyn felt a profound sense of purpose once she became a mother. And coupled with planning her wedding, she felt like she was on the right path. Just 3 months later, in July 2015, they married in South Carolina. The wedding was expedited due to an impending rule change affecting their relationship between lower and higher ranking officers. So they had to hurry up and get this done before that rule went into effect. Now, despite their commitment to each other, they continued to live apart and they had to grapple with the challenges of a long distance relationship. And they actively pursued transfer opportunities so that they could bridge this geographical gap, but was unable to do so. On August 5th, 2015, the new rule was officially implemented with full compliance expected by November.
By August, the couple's dreams had tragically dissolved, leaving the police struggling to piece together the events leading up to this shocking crime. The incident sent shockwaves through Maryland community and devastated Karlyn's family. Sergeant McDaniel, who was still on the scene, gave police a lot of information. He was a close confidant, but he was also her superior. He provided details about Karlyn's life, revealing a significant event that occurred just a month prior to her death. Karlyn and Malik called him late at night, and he was very alarmed by this phone call, mainly because it was late at night, but both of them were on the phone. And Karlyn was hysterical. She was distraught, and Malik seemed to be angry as well. He told Karlyn that she needed to confess, and she confessed to having an affair with another soldier. Sergeant McDaniels reported the affair as her superior because in military law, they had to report that type of behavior. And it carried significant consequences, such as a reduction in rank and loss of pay, which Karlyn ultimately faced these penalties along with the person that she had the affair with. She was overwhelmed with remorse for her action. I mean, she just had her daughter recently. She was trying to struggle with getting her family unit together, and she felt like obviously this affair was her fault and she wanted to keep her marriage together. However, she confided in Sergeant McDaniels that Malik had become increasingly jealous and made it difficult for them to salvage their relationship. Ultimately, she decided to seek a divorce. And when that didn't pan out the way that she wanted it to, she wanted an amicable divorce, but really, Malik didn't want that. He wanted her back in his life on his terms. So she ended up obtaining a no contact order against him, prohibiting any direct or indirect communication between the two. On August 27th, investigators traveled to Fort Jackson in South Carolina to tell Malik of the news of Karlyn's death. Upon informing him of Karlyn's death, he displayed visible emotion. I mean, he was distraught. There's actually some interview of the time that they pulled him aside and told him about the murder, and he was visibly distraught. I mean, he was crying, very upset. He claimed that he last seen Karlyn on August 1st, emphasizing his desire to reconcile and preserve their family, asserting he would never do anything to harm her. He stated that on August 24th, he was home alone. He offered his cell phone. He offered for them to search his car and even offered DNA samples. While the initial search yielded nothing conclusive, investigators awaited the result of the forensic analysis of his cell phone, which that takes a lot of time for police to go through all of that information. And also, the distance between Fort Meade and Fort Jackson was a significant distance. So they figured that more than likely, if he was at home, which they were able to confirm that he more than likely wasn't the person they were looking for. And I'm guessing they looked at his mileage on his car. So all of that just didn't seem to add up. They eventually had to move on while they awaited those cell phone analysis. Now, investigators received the autopsy report for the medical examiner, and he determined that although she was shot 3 times, there were 2 shots to the chest. All of the shots were fatal. But despite the initial indications of sexual assault, there was no sign. So whoever committed this crime planned it out purposely to throw investigators off their trail. This was a methodical murder. They thought about it, they planned it, and they wanted to get away with the murder. So they had to pivot from their original theory.
Well, Steph, before we keep going, so are you saying that basically they tried to make it look like it was a sexual assault, but it really wasn't? Like they intentionally tried to leave these clues there to throw investigators off?
I mean, yeah. So we talked about how when Carlin was found, her pants were pulled down, her underwear were pulled down. There was a condom wrapper on the ground in the living room, which implied that someone recently used it. So all of those things naturally would have one to think that this was a sexual assault.
And when the ME did the autopsy, they were like, there was no sexual assault that took place here.
There was no signs that she had been in a sexual situation that caused abrasions, things like that. So they were able to definitively rule out that she was not sexually assaulted at that time.
Interesting. Well, the police initiated an investigation by interviewing the man that they knew was having an affair with Karlyn. He was a married soldier who, when told about Karlyn's death, was also deeply affected. He readily handed over his cell phone. He submitted a search of his vehicle. He gave his alibi. He was like, listen, whatever you need, here it is. Forensic evidence, including DNA recovered from the condom wrapper, linked him to the scene. He claimed that he and Karlyn continued their relationship despite having suffered consequences. However, they were intimate on August 23rd, and he maintained that the encounter was, in fact, sexual. So, Steph, he's saying, yeah, I did have this sexual, contact with her on August 23rd.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying he did it, But the thing that the ME would be looking for is abrasions in the vaginal area, things that would suggest that the sexual encounter was not consensual. So he didn't find that, which obviously means that it's confirming, if anything, because we don't know, we can't talk to Karlyn, but it's confirming that indeed that was
You it looked
a sexual
consensual.
encounter that was consensual.
Right. And when the investigators, dug into his alibi, it checked out. And he took a polygraph test and he passed. And he was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. The police shift gears and they had to pivot again and try to look for another potential lead. And another potential lead did emerge. Karlyn recently spent time with a different man from another area who admitted to a previous hookup with her a week before the murder. Now, her roommate, Marissa, mentioned that she and Karlyn had traveled to Virginia Beach to visit her family. And on one of the nights while they were in Virginia Beach, they went out on the town and Karlyn bumped into an old high school acquaintance. And she had an intimate encounter with that person. And this happened 2 days before her death. However, after being interviewed, he was determined to be off the suspect list as well. They were able to confirm that he was elsewhere during the time of Karlyn's murder. Upon further forensic examination of phone records, Malik's alibi was confirmed that he was, in fact, at his apartment from August 23rd to August 25th. Nonetheless, forensic data revealed that Malik had downloaded a wiping application on his phone, which erased all the data on the date of August 20 into the morning of August 25th. So, partial data recovery did show that multiple texts and voice calls to an individual named Dodo. And they linked that phone number to a 30-year-old Army veteran named Dolores Delgado from Merritt Island, Florida. She was originally from New Mexico and she had served time in Iraq. Dolores transitioned to the medical field in Florida after she left the armed services.
So investigators went and paid her a visit in Florida. And when interviewed, like when they walked right up to her door and she answered, she immediately suggested that they must be there to talk about Malik. Now, this was unusual, so they asked her to come down to the police station and she detailed a complex intermittent relationship with Malik. She claimed that they dated back in 2008, way before Karlyn was ever involved. They actually deployed together. She and Malik had what I call a glorified situationship. Like they weren't ever truly together, but they slept together and they were on and off again, maintaining other relationships in between that time. Like maybe he would have a girlfriend, but she would still sleep with him and vice versa. But they always remained in contact with one another. But she claimed where she drew the line was when he got married to Karlyn. And upon their strife in their relationship, she remained that she was a listening ear for Malik. And she was actually trying to help them reconcile their relationship. She denied any involvement in Karlyn's murder, and she showed emotion when investigators told her that Karlyn was murdered. She claimed that on August 24th, she was with Malik and spent the entire evening with him, and he never left, never borrowed her car, was always with her asleep. Now, this statement by itself conflicted with Malik's assertion that he made earlier to detectives. He claimed that he was at his home on the night of the murder alone. So they retrieve her phone and do the whole forensic testing on her phone just to make sure that her story checks out. But they find a text message exchange prior to the murder, and it was between her and Malik. And she said to him, "This gun is so damn loud." So they look further into her cell phone and social media, and they discover that she was trying to sell a 357 caliber gun. That should be very familiar to you. And they also found on this picture that there was a store where she bought ammunition that included a price tag, which referenced the store where she purchased it. So they contact that business and they confirmed that Dolores indeed did purchase and own a 357 handgun. So they now were able to link Dolores to the gun, and they have texts that can substantiate that Malik had some type of awareness of this gun. and maybe he had something to do with the murder. During the time of the investigation, which this took some time, this happened in 2015, and by 2016, Malik had transferred through the military to San Antonio, Texas. And shortly after that, so did Dolores. So they knew they needed to act quickly because maybe they were going to try to flee together. Maybe something was going on that would encumber the investigation. So they did so. In October of 2016, they arrest both Dolores and Malik in San Antonio, Texas. Now, the grand jury returned an indictment for interstate travel to commit domestic violence, resulting in the murder of Karlyn Ramirez. Those are the formal charges. National news coverage went everywhere around this case. I mean, this was a case that had all the elements of surprise and sent shockwaves through the community. But as a result of this becoming a national case, there were some people that came forward with some good information. And one of those witnesses that came forward knew that Dolores owned this 357 handgun because she actually asked him to help to discard the gun late 2015. So they disassembled the revolver, attempted to destroy the serial number, and threw it off of a fishing pier near the Banana River. And thankfully and surprisingly, a whole year later, they were able to recover pieces of that gun. It was the same serial number from the revolver she purchased at that gun shop. They conducted test fire from the gun recovered, but they were able to assemble the pieces together and also get a piece that fit. And they were able to definitively say that they were the same bullets that they recovered at Karlyn's residence. So this evidence was damning against Dolores, but they wondered if during trial this would kind of be a he say, she say thing against her and Malik, like they would blame it on each other. So they wanted to get more information. So they offered her the opportunity to tell her story. They believed that she obviously was an accessory, but Malik was responsible and he pulled the trigger, and they wanted to get that story from her.
So, according to Dolores, on the afternoon of August 24th, she arrived at Malik's apartment and she brought the gun and she allowed him to use her car. He left his cell phone at the house and he told her, stream movies and act as if, somebody is here so that it would confirm his alibi that he was home alone the whole night. And he took her car and drove to Maryland, where then he didn't return until early the next morning. And he told her when he returned what inevitably happened while he was gone. He said that he let himself in by using the key he had, and he forced Karlyn to go upstairs. He told her that Karlyn tried to fight him and, take the gun from him, but she was unsuccessful. He misfired once, but the other bullets made contact. He said that he pulled down her underwear and took off her pants, placed the baby in her arms, and headed out the back door. They believe that Dolores was probably hoping that if Karlyn was out of the picture, that if she was no longer an issue for Malik, that maybe her and Malik could make this thing work. And they had all the evidence. They took them to trial, and Dolores entered a plea of guilty to conspiracy to interstate travel and commit a crime of violence. And they prepared for trial against Malik.
The trial began July 2016 in Baltimore. And of course, their star witness was Dolores Delgado. Her testimony was powerful. The DA believed that he didn't want anyone to have Karlyn, and that's why he ended up killing her, because she would not relent. On August 9th, the jury convicted Malik on both counts, and he was sentenced to life without parole plus 10 years. Dolores was sentenced to 17 years. Dolores Delgado will be released in 2031, and Malik and Karlyn's child is currently being raised by Karlyn's family. One of the things that stuck out to me in this case is that they said they love to share memories of Karlyn. It's the way that they keep her memory alive. So, on to our takeaway for this case. This case, for me, I think a lot of victim shaming can come from this case when you think about maybe some of the decisions that Karlyn and even Malik made. I think you can pinpoint what they did wrong and use the lens of hindsight that even Karlyn wasn't afforded to use. And we can nitpick at victims and say what they should and should not have done. But one of the things that I want to leave you with is that I think that Karlyn really saw that Malik was on his way to committing some type of violence, which is why she put in that no contact order and why she chose to divorce him, because he was possessive. And I even believe that maybe there was some type of domestic violence there inside of that situation. And I just want to commend her, although she's not here, for making that choice, because she really tried to get out of that situation. And unfortunately, because she did not relent to his demands, because he was used to getting what he wanted, you can see that in the reflection of his relationship with Dolores, how he ruined her life and easily influenced her. Because she didn't relent, he decided to kill her. And those are things that you can't watch out for. We often talk about how things are cautionary and you can look out and you can see it. Sometimes you can see a little clearer or you can use wisdom, but she probably had no idea that because she chose to leave that situation, that he would kill her for it. And also, I just want to say that not only was he evil for killing Karlyn, but my God, for you to leave your 4-month-old daughter on the ground after shooting her mother just shows you the type of evil that was inside of him. And I think they really thought, because they planned out that murder and because he was able to manipulate some of the things on scene, that eventually he wouldn't get caught. But the truth always comes out in the end.
I just want to commend the investigators for just following the evidence in this case. They followed it. They didn't just look at him or look at one particular person and just hone in. I think a lot of times you see investigators feeling right or wrong that they got the person and they don't look at other suspects. And I think in this case, they really, followed the evidence, interviewed, tracked down, and the evidence came right circled right back on around to Malik. Even after they were able to confirm his alibi, they didn't stop there. They continued to check their boxes, cross their T's, dot their I's, and like you said, the truth came forth.
Since we have time, because I see that we're right at the 30-minute mark, I'm going to tell y'all a story, and I'm going to tell MD a story as well. Now, this is a listener suggestion, and it's a story that I looked into, and there's not just a ton of information to make it just a full episode by itself. So I thought about doing story time with Steph, but since we have time, I might as well give it to y'all. So, shout out to the listener who sent this in. She sent this in actually, I want to say at the top of the year, and I just was able to circle back and see it. This particular case is about Angie Barlow. Angie Barlow was born on August 21st, 1993 in Colorado. She had 3 younger sisters and she loved her family intensely. She was the oldest, and what comes along with being the oldest is that you're often overprotective, and that's exactly how she was with her sisters. She was extremely athletic in high school, and she eventually moved to Indianapolis with her best friend, Mona Jackson. There, she was just trying to figure out her life. You know how you are in your early 20s. You're just trying to figure it out. What do you want to do? And she decided that she would share an apartment with her best friend and work as a dancer at Club Rio. Now, her mother did not like her dancing. She actually wished her daughter would have chose another job, but hey, what can you say when they're grown, right? You can only give them your suggestions. Well, she loved her job, actually. She loved the creativity of being able to dance, and the money was good. You can't complain there. Eventually, she was hoping to save up her money to venture out and figure out other things in her life that she wanted to do. While she was dancing, she also did private house parties where, very similar. And I hate to say this, but I'm a reference person. And so I try to do references for people to really catch it and grab it. So when I think of private house parties, I think of the Players Club. when Ronnie did those private house parties. You know what I'm talking about, MD?
I mean, how could I forget that?
Okay. So, I mean, just to give you a visual, give you some understanding. Okay. So she also did that as well, just another way of getting extra money. In October of 2017, Angie received a text message from a woman requesting a private dance for her husband's birthday party. But what was unusual about this text is that the woman never gave Angie her name. She simply said, "Hey, I want you to come and do my husband's birthday party. I'll give you the deets. Here's how much money I'm offering you," but didn't say her name. Now, she shared this with her friend Mona. She said, "Mona, girl, this person wants me to come and dance, but they didn't give me their name. I don't know if I want to do it." And Mona found this to be suspicious. She felt like, well, why aren't they telling you their name? And who's the husband? Like, where are the details, right? But, time went on, but the person kept texting her and asking and requesting. And as it is sometimes you're running low with your money. And that's how it was at Club Rio on a particular week. Her money was slow and she needed some money. So she decided to actually take the gig. Now, she gets everything together, and actually the woman requested that Angie dress in red and black lingerie. So on October 26th, she's ready to go, and Angie sends Mona a text message with the location, which was Landmark Apartments and Townhomes, as well as the access code for her to get in, just in case. You know how it is. I would say it's similar to sending your friend your location. What about that, MD? Do you suggest that we all send a friend a location? I know we've talked about text messages, but what do you think about dropping the location?
All the time. I mean, all if we do it, our family, I have Steph's location, I have her husband's location. They got mine, they got my husband. I mean, yes, like somebody needs to know where you are. I mean, nobody's stalking it. Like nobody's like, but if
Right.
I know you're out and about, especially in this situation, I'm your friend and I know you're out and going to somewhere that I already think is suspicious. At least I can track you. At least I can follow your whereabouts so that if I don't hear from you or you're not responding to my text messages, I know how to come to you.
Exactly. And so this was her practice. This is what she usually did anyway. So I don't want to say this was different, but the message was as follows: doing a house party at this address just in case I go missing. And we say that to friends and family, girl, just in case I go missing because I'm going on this date. You know how we do. And by no means did she really think that she would go missing.
Right.
However,
This is her standard practice. It's what she
right,
does.
right.
Makes
This
sense.
would be the last conversation she would have, and this happened around 11:45. But she soon Snapchatted a picture, kind of just like getting ready. She seemed to be cute and dolled up, ready for her performance, and nothing seemed to be amiss. But Angie never made it home that night. She never came home. And the one thing about Angie is Angie had a little dog named Pablo, and she would make sure that he was in the bathroom, make sure he had water and he was good. But regardless of anytime she was supposed to get at home, she would always come back home so she could take her dog Pablo out of the bathroom to relieve herself, right? So the fact that she didn't come home to take care of her dog was an indication that something was wrong. So Angie's mother called Angie the next morning just to talk to her, something they always did, and Angie didn't pick up the phone. So Angie's mother went to the apartment to check on her. However, she wasn't there, and Pablo was still in the bathroom from the evening before. Both Angie's mother and Mona are freaking out. So Mona and Angie's mother decide to go to the apartment complex where she dropped her Addie, right? So they're gonna go and look and knock on the door. And they knock on the apartment door, but no one's there. And let me tell you, Mona is a real OG, and this is why. This is why she's her best friend, or was her best friend. It's because she decides to hop the fence over to get to the apartment's back door, and she opens it up.
And does. That's what
And
best
she
friends
opens
do.
up. It is. It is. She decides that she has to figure out what's going on. But when she walks in, the apartment just looks like it's been, I don't want to say ransacked, but it looks cleaned out. It looks like there was a party there and people left. Upon hearing about all of this, Mona is distressed, so is her mother, and Angie's mother decides to go to the police, and she reports her 23-year-old daughter as missing. Now, investigators do their due diligence. They don't wait. They don't say you have to wait 24 hours. They immediately start looking for her. And one of the first places they checked was the CCTV footage and camera around the apartment complex. And they noticed that it actually caught a picture or captured footage of Angie's blue Pontiac G6. It was leaving the apartment complex around 3:30 a.m. Shortly after that, they saw a dark colored vehicle following her car. Now, they didn't know if the two were connected or if Angie was just leaving, but they weren't able to tell who the driver was on the surveillance footage. So immediately they were pushing out posters, posting flyers, doing ground searches, trying to find out where Angie was. And they were able to make out the license plate of the second vehicle seen shortly leaving after Angie did, or who they believed Angie was. And the car was traced back to a woman by the name of Raven Miller. Now, they find out that the number that had been texting Angie, who never gave their name, was actually Raven. And the reason why this is interesting is because Angie actually knew Raven Miller or knew of her. And this is why. Because Angie dated a man by the name of Baron McCullough, and they met at her club. And they didn't have a relationship. They have what I just said in our other case. They had a situationship. They were never in a relationship, but they just, they fooled around, they hooked up. But eventually they decided to stop. And I don't know what's unclear about this particular case. I don't know if Angie's situationship bled over into his actual relationship with Raven. It seems that maybe it did. Now, Raven was Baron's current girlfriend, and it was suspected that she and Angie didn't get along. And that if Angie would have known that it was Raven who asked her to come to this party and perform for Baron, she would have never came, right? Like, she wouldn't have showed up. So what do you think about all this so far, MD?
I'm just shaking my head because I'm just like, obviously, Raven has some sort of like envy, for Angie, and just to think that yes, your question is, did they lure her? I don't know if they did, but it's pretty evident that Raven did, right? Like, I don't know if Baron is tied into this at all, or if he was just as surprised as Angie was, but I'm just like, for a guy, that's why I'm over here shaking my head, just because I'm just like, for a guy, we're doing all of this for a guy.
For a guy. And it is. And so, in fact, they did lure her, but the police surmised that they couldn't have done this on their own, right? There had to have, because if Angie would have came into the apartment, which she was obviously letting in because we know she took that picture of herself on Snapchat, if she would have saw Baron or she would have saw Raven, she probably would have left, right? So they couldn't have been the people to open the door. There had to be a third party, maybe a fourth, fifth. Maybe there was other people there before Baron and Raven got there that made her feel comfortable enough to continue to remain there,
So
So
it was
they,
a party. It really was a party, and she walked in to this party.
well, at least that's what the police are surmising. They don't know anything definitively yet. They're just kind of like putting the pieces of the puzzle together, maybe trying to figure it out, because you have to keep in mind that she did take that Snapchat picture. So somebody might have let her in, whether it was one person or a party. It was somebody, right? Like, there were other people other than Baron and Raven. This is just what they're thinking. So they eventually get in contact with Baron and Raven, and they bring them down for questioning. And according to them, they did see Angie at the party, but she left with an unnamed man. And there wasn't anything to tie them to the disappearance. I mean, nothing. They couldn't hold them on anything. That was it. It was like, okay, y'all were there. Weird. All right. 12 days later, Angie's car was found. It was badly damaged, almost like she ran her car into, what's that wire, MD, that's on prison fences? I
Oh,
forget what it's
I know
called.
exactly what you're
Like
talking about.
barbed wire.
Barbed
Yeah,
wire?
yeah. Her car had scratches all on the, like, front, the back, the side, and a headlight was smashed as if maybe she ran into somebody. They couldn't figure it out. But police never released what they found in her vehicle. They never came out and said, this is what we found or identified anything. And we know they don't do that sometimes because they're just trying to keep up with the integrity of the case. Now, the family put out $1,000 reward in hopes that someone would come forward with information about Angie's disappearance. And they were hoping, and I want to touch on this for a second. MD, you can give me your thoughts just about the hope that a lot of people have when their family members have disappeared. How in some cases, you hear that the family believe that their family member is alive, like in this particular case. But in some cases, you also hear family members say, no, they're deceased. We're just hoping to bring them back home. And that type of hope, what do you think about that? Like in terms of the disappearances that we've discussed before, and then as that relates to murder cases?
I think that hope is a very intangible thing, right? Like, it's something that you're pushing to hold on to, and you want it even as unrealistic as it may be. Even if everything in your body is telling you there is no hope, you want to just believe it. I think that, especially in disappearance, in cases where, kidnapping and disappearances, and you can hear the facts and know the stats, like know that, the longer you go without that person being found, the more likely that you're going to find them deceased. You're not going to find them alive. Or you could find a whole bloody scene, but no body, and still like want to believe that like just maybe they escaped and they're somewhere and somebody's holding them. Because I think for some people, and I just think it's a case by case, person by person thing, like, just how you're wired. It may be easier to believe that they're still alive than it is to grapple with their idea that they're not here, especially when there's nothing definitive. Like, I can't see a body, like, I haven't had a funeral, I haven't, like, nobody's telling me that they are for real dead, but at the same time, I know that it's likely that they are. It's just really difficult.
Oh, to your point that when you don't have anything tangible or any evidence pointing to murder, I think that's why a lot of times that hope can permeate. And that was the truth for Angie's mother. 4 months into Angie's disappearance, her mother, Christina, received a phone call from the number that contacted Angie for the initial dance. And we know who that is. It was Raven. Raven called her, and she claimed that she had a conversation with Angie. And of course, Christina asked, what kind of conversation did you have? What happened? And she remarked to Christina, oh, you want to know what her last words were?
Her last words? I mean, first of all, Stephen, I don't mean to pause your story, like, but I think I'm just stuck for a second on the fact that she had the gall to call her mom. Like, why are you reinserting yourself? Like, they can't prove you had anything to do with this alleged crime, disappearance. We don't know what it is at this point. And you go reinsert yourself into the evidence, basically. Like, I'm gonna call mom and be like, I talked to Angie. And do you want to know her last words? Because that's usually only used when a person's dead.
Her mother was like, what do you mean? Angie's dead. She's no longer here. And we really don't get more into that conversation. I don't know if the phone call, she hung up the phone or if one of them discontinued the phone call, but we really don't know what happened after she said that. So this really made the family believe that Angie wasn't alive anymore. And obviously, Raven had something to do with it. And as the case went on, Raven and Barron moved from Indianapolis to Arizona. And there still wasn't anything to tie them to the disappearance. Although sketchy, although she reinserted herself back into the scenario, there was nothing to arrest either one of them on. An additional 3 months passed, totaling 7 months since Angie's disappearance. And they discovered that someone had used Angie's information, the information that only Angie knew, to steal $8,000 from her grandmother's account. This was unusual to investigators, and because only Angie knew about her grandmother's account, they knew that more than likely the person who stole this money had to know something about Angie's disappearance. 2 plus 2 equals 4, obviously. And so they tie down or they track down the person who is responsible for stealing the $8,000 from Angie's grandmother. Her name was Michelle Brown. She had an interesting story to tell. She said that she knew nothing about Angie and that she chose Angie's grandmother at pure random.
But how she get Angie's grandmother's information?
Good question. As a result of catching up with Michelle Brown, they ended up arresting 3 more people in addition to Michelle Brown for the stolen money. Their names are DeAndre Twill, Marquez Bell, and Eric Newton. And well, police believe that they have nothing to hang their hats on, right? Very much like the third party that we were talking about when Angie arrived at the apartment complex. But they believe that these people, including Michelle Brown, may have had something to do with Angie's disappearance. Maybe they were the third parties involved, right? But they can't tie them to that. They charge them for stealing. And an anonymous tip came in shortly after all of this took place. The anonymous tipster said they knew the location of Angie's body. And her mother still hoped, because of course, when they get this anonymous tip, they don't call up Christina and tell her, hey, we got this anonymous tip that your daughter's dead, right? They have to confirm it. But still, Angie's mother, Christina, is holding on to hope that her daughter is alive. They go to the backyard of this home where it's believed that Angie is. It was vacant. It was 10 minutes away from where she was last seen, where they found her car. They used dogs and they were able to find the remains of a woman in a shallow grave. And through tattoos, they were able to identify and confirm that it was Angie Barlow. On July 2nd, 2017, her family held her funeral where they said their last goodbyes to Angie. And what's interesting about the end of this case is that Barron and Raven have never been charged with murder. Neither have those individuals that they arrested in connection with her grandmother's stolen money. But Raven has since become a rap star. She has a rap name and it's actually hilarious. But she came out with a song, and I would include a clip on the pictures that I usually feature for this week's case. But she came out with a song that talks about how she smoked on Barlow, basically implicating that she did kill Angie Barlow. She still is living, thriving. To my knowledge, she's still in a relationship with Barron. And this is where I plead to you guys as listeners, because somebody out there has information about Angie Barlow, because it's very clearly her.
And Barron. It's so very obvious. You just don't have the evidence to link. And it's interesting that they don't have, I mean, they must not have any, because they must not have even enough circumstantial evidence.
If you or somebody else knows something, because usually people start talking, much like the Asha Degree case, usually with time and liquor, people start talking. So you can contact Crime Stoppers USA at 1-800-22-TIPS. Make sure you call them if you know anything, if you heard any, even if you don't know the person, but you heard through the grapevine.
Yeah, you heard through the grapevine. You heard a third party story. Please, 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 because you don't know what you know could be the missing piece that the investigators needed to tie them. And I really hope, Steph, like I'm really hoping that our listeners can help in this case, because the audacity, and I mean, just how disrespectful can you really even be to call her mom and say, I mean, do you want to know her last words? I mean, you have to be low down. You have to be a certain type of evil. And she deserves to be underneath the jail cell.
Exactly. And I just want to say again, I will include Raven's rapper name in the show notes and also on Instagram because I'm not going to try to find it right now. But super shout out Softest Satin who asked for this case. I'm working on another case that you asked me about. And I just want to encourage all of you to tell us a case that has left an impression upon you that you'll always remember. It's etched on your heart for forever, because a lot of the listener suggestions that you guys have been giving this season has wiped me out. And I'm talking
Yeah.
about, I really thought that I knew a lot of these cases, and I'm like, my Lord, this is crazy. Like the Angie Barlow's case, it took me out. And there's a podcast dedicated to finding out what happened to Angie Barlow. So
Listen, your listener suggestions have definitely been chef's kiss. I did not know this case. Steph's telling it to you at the same time that I'm learning. And I mean, I wish you guys could see my face. Like I've been over here, just mouth wide open,
yeah,
like eyes budged. I can't just so very good case. Please send more.
send more, y'all. And we just want to say thank you to everyone who has continued to support us. Make sure you leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Leave us a review. Give us 5 stars. If it ain't 5, don't give it. No, I'm just playing. But for real.
But seriously.
Um, until next time, this is Murder in the Black.